All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome to FEMTECH Live Lounge, a quarterly discussion that celebrates the intersection of technology and the AI industry. This series is presented by Virtual Patent Gateway. Today's discussion is moderated by Meredith Schoenfeld, Associate General Counsel at the University of Delaware. Joining Meredith is Coreena Brinck, founder of the Brinck Sanders Consultancy and head of IP at Intuicell, Socheth McCutcheon, Associate General Counsel, Verizon, and Deepa Tharmaraj, head of legal at eCarx and founder of Well. And with that, I'll hand things over to Meredith.
Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today's title is Beyond Algorithms, AI's Impact on Well-Being and Privacy. So we're going to have a discussion. The goal today is to talk about responsible and ethical AI practices, and we're going to focus on privacy, and we're going to focus on alleviating some common concerns that people have with AI while offering, hopefully, some practical advice for navigating the very quickly evolving and changing AI landscape. So as AI continues to evolve, I think a lot of us, it's very normal to have concerns. There's misinformation, we see deep fakes, we know that there's a lot of data out there, we're concerned about our data privacy. It's natural for people to worry about how these technologies might be misused or be leading to consequences that some of us don't want. But today, instead of dwelling on the problems, we're going to focus on some solutions and specifically how responsible and ethical AI can help address these issues. So first, I'd like to have our expert panel introduce themselves. So we can start with So.
Hi, I'm McCutcheon, or Socheth. I'm an attorney with over 15 years of experience in privacy, and I've been recently very focused on AI, especially in the workforce employee context. So I'm really happy to be here, really looking forward to this discussion. And also, I know the others will chime in to say the same thing, but everything I say here is my own personal opinion and does not represent the opinion of the company that I work for. Thank you, Meredith.
Great. And next, Coreena.
Hi, yes. So my name is Coreena Brinck. I'm a European and UK patent attorney. I'm a fractional head of intellectual property for a Swedish artificial general intelligence startup, and I'm also working in private practice as a patent attorney consultant for a firm called 2IP. The views I'll be representing here are my own, but like so many in my industry, it's not that I handle more AI from a technology perspective every day, but I'm also being presented with AI tools. And a lot of the industry within the sort of legal profession, it has huge concerns over the use of these tools. And it's such a rapidly evolving field and there's so much uncertainty. So I think we're going to have a really interesting discussion about the issues like privacy and how we manage client information today.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Deepa.
Thank you. Thanks, Meredith. So I'm Deepa Tharmaraj. I'm based in the UK. I've always been an in-house counsel. And the advantage of being in-house counsel is the fact that when you see that there is a gap, whether, especially as you're starting off on an AI journey, it's always great to jump in and really support the customers in terms of setting up an AI governance framework in place. In addition to being an in-house counsel, I am also the founder of a not-for-profit called Well, which is an inflection point of women, work, and faith. And in fact, today, where I'm going to come from, the perspectives that I'm going to bring in is really from Well as opposed to my workplace. And so again, I can speak from the conversations I've had with women through this journey about some of their concerns, the anxieties, the fear, what I'm hearing on the ground, and really, and which is why, as you said, Meredith, it's about we want to be positive today. We want to give you the tips as opposed to dwelling on the fear element of AI.
Great, thank you so much. So responsible AI is something, that we sort of hear a lot. It's a buzzword, but I don't think that, people always know exactly what it means, or, you kind of think, okay, I'm just using this system. Like, what is the responsibility here? What does responsible AI mean? But, here I think we can really talk about how it can be a guiding principle for a lot of, policymakers and organizations, and, really think about how we create AI systems that can be transparent, that can be fair, that can be respectful of our privacy. And, in that way, we can really reduce some of the harmful outputs and prevent bias. So just kind of a way to steer AI in the direction that we want. So it, before the challenges of AI really become crisis. And I think, this is a really good time to be having this conversation, because there's been a lot of changes around regulation in AI, a lot of discussion. And I think, as Deepa touched on, I think it is affecting people mentally, kind of use of it and concern about it and worrying about replacement of jobs, or what information is out there. So I think, this is a really pertinent conversation. Like some of the recent headlines have talked about cases where people's personal data has been used to train models without their consent. There's a lot of questions now about trusting AI, or what information's out there, or how we can handle it ethically, and, respect individuals' rights. So, AI presents a lot of challenges, but, I think we're here to talk about a path forward and what we can prioritize. So, as I mentioned earlier, like, our goal here is to talk about some practical strategies and examples. So first of all, I think, the way to frame the conversation is just talk about what are these core principles of responsible AI. So, if someone would like to jump in and talk about, what are core principles that you see in this field?
So I'll get us started, and I want to use Verizon's responsible AI principles as an example. I'm really proud of it. I know the company is very proud of it. It's public, so people can look it up and see a little bit more detail. I'm just going to summarize at a high level what I think the core principles are. Governance is the first one. Deepa, you've already mentioned that, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But that's essentially having a framework to oversee the development and use of AI. It's really important to have that governing body to oversee all of that. We're going to talk a little bit more later about the intersection between privacy and AI, but respect for privacy is a core principle. Having a privacy by design approach, where we're considering the kinds of data that's being used, whether the data is being used to train models, whether it's being used to make decisions. Then also transparency, of course, is a core tenet of privacy, and therefore a core principle of responsible AI. Technical robustness, and within that, there's the security by design concept, as well as understanding what the industry accepted metrics are to evaluate AI's ability to come up with accurate, reliable, and consistent outputs. And then the last, which I know that this group is going to want to talk about as well, I think is very, very important, is respect for human rights and responsibility to the society. So just summing up what the Verizon core principles are, and I'm really, really proud of. And I think we're going to have a lot of great discussions around principles here.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And before anyone else weighs in, I am curious about if you could talk just a little bit about, how Verizon got there, as maybe a model for other companies to kind of prioritize this issue.
We are a technology company, and we definitely embrace new cutting edge technology. It's just simply one of them. There are definitely ways to use AI responsibly, and ways where we're not careful. And so putting in place a governing body, a committee, a council to oversee all of that, so that whatever we do, it's a big company, and so we are doing a lot of different things with AI, and just making sure that we're all in sync, that it's consistent, the guidance is there, the support is there. There are people like my colleagues who are AI lawyers to advise the business. There are people who are thinking about it strategically, thinking about it with with respect to what's being used internally, but also what is being used by our consumers, our customers, and it's just something that's really important to do right. And we have really prioritized making sure that whatever we do from an AI perspective comports with all of these principles.
And Meredith, if I may jump in as well.
Sure.
The message, the tone has to be set at the top, right? So it's important for the leaders of the company, because with AI tools and platforms, they come in two different ways, which is through procurement, where we are buying those tools for internal use. And then, of course, where we are building these AI architectures or tools for our customers. And so, in both instances, especially when an organization is starting on that journey, where it typically starts is with procurement, and it's important for procurement to get that stakeholder engagement right at the leadership level, so that the governance principles can be set in place, whether it's transparency, whether it's explainable, whether it's responsible, all of them. So really, it has to start from a leadership perspective, saying, okay, we are, especially with recruitment, tools that are increasingly anything, even WhatsApp has got little AI widget in them, anything. So it's important, it starts with the leadership to set the message right and get the right functions to start supporting building that committee that you were talking about. So.
And if
Yeah, I think that's, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in there. I think it even starts before procurement, because the pace of AI has rolled out so quickly and it's so visible now in public. You have employees who are using their apps on their phones to try to do their work in a way that they think is better or faster. But of course, that's under the radar AI potentially. And the challenges, you mentioned about WhatsApp and AI appearing, is that whatever leadership position is taken, it's got to be, adaptable and fluid and address these issues. Because I suspect in many issues, privacy and the ethical fairness is not necessarily going to creep in through the use of AI tools where we have that leadership and procurement process, because they're monitored. It's employees who are using, oh, I've got the latest version of ChatGPT. And of course, to them, why wouldn't they use it? And that, I think, is a big challenge that we're going to face.
Correct. If they don't understand the tools that they are using and the risks that comes along with by using those tools in a way that is not intentional and informed.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. So I don't know if there's any other, core principles that we want to talk about. If not, we can move on to our next topic about the intersection of privacy and AI. And I think, I know we touched on that a little bit before, but if we could talk a little bit more about, where those two intersect and how, caring for privacy can alleviate some of those AI concerns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I think it's good to talk about the obvious, which is that as AI systems become more common and integrated into our daily lives, personal and professional, that intersection between privacy and AI becomes even more important. And the reason why is that AI uses a lot of data. And a lot of that can be personal, it can be sensitive. And so that reliance on data creates inherent privacy challenges that, if not addressed proactively, can significantly undermine trust and acceptance of the tools, of the AI-enabled tools. And so putting privacy in the design, in the development, in the deployment of AI tools, super critical to building that trust and certainly mitigating the fears people have about AI. And so when people feel like their privacy is respected, their privacy is protected, they're more likely to embrace the benefits of AI. And so in my opinion, this goes beyond just mere legal compliance, but it involves a commitment to responsible AI and responsible data protection practices with respect to AI.
I agree, actually. I think one of the biggest concerns I have is AI systems are inherently built to infer information, and some of that information, whether it's your sort of, your gender, your sexual orientation, your sort of, financial profiling, all of this we might consider to be very private information. It's not something that we would consider to be directly exposed. The AI systems themselves, so they're not built, can be used to extract that information. And that is, I think, an area where, as you say, so strong principles of privacy management need to be built into these systems to alleviate those fears. And also just awareness that people are giving away without, say, realizing it when their data is shared. So many platforms these days, we've all seen it. You download software, you download an app, and you tick the box saying you don't really mind what they do with the data because you want to use the app. But actually, it's incredible the sort of information that can be extracted that way, particularly by people who sell your data on to other data aggregators.
Yeah. And that brings up a point that I always think about. So as a privacy attorney, a couple of the important questions that I ask is this creepy? Are people going to think that Big Brother is watching? What's happening with the data? And so these questions apply in the AI context. And there's so much fear of the unknown, and being transparent in the context of AI is pulling back the curtains and letting people see what's inside that mysterious black box that's magical, and that means explaining what data is being collected, how it's being processed, why it's needed, who has access to it, how long it's kept for, and then also what data is being used to train the AI, and whether the data that's put into the AI tool is being used to build and refine algorithms. And so that clarity, at my company, we say clear is kind. That clarity really demystifies for the user that unknown, and replaces the fear with a sense of understanding and control. So being able to do that right, I think, is really important. And it's also kind of an art, but it's also a science. And it's tricky to do, but it's very important to do.
And I suppose that's why, even the regulators, like with EU AI Act, they are starting to mandate that employers do, both, the organization that's deploying the AI tool and the provider of the AI tool ensure that there is a way in which that the employees who are using the tool will have informed use of the AI. So there must be some training. We can't just allow employees to start using these tools without the right training in place. So it's good that the regulators are starting to mandate this requirement so that there is an informed use of that AI platform. I think that's a good move in the right direction.
I think there's also something here to be said for a lot of the developers of AI systems to make how they are, where they're training data, to the provenance of that data more transparent, because it's, so often they are selling the service that the tool provides, and there's a tendency for people to see the end result. I think that's wonderful, without asking the right questions necessarily about where will the data that they provide as prompts go. What happens if you're in a private practice situation where you've got to keep different data domains for certain clients, and whereas you may have more freedom if you're in-house and it's just effectively one sort of security domain. And there's all sorts of nuances depending on the application that you're going to be using an AI tool for, where you might want to ask certain questions. The challenge for so many people is finding what those questions are, and also knowing that they need to dig a little deeper to get the answers that they really need to hear. And I think that's something that will come. But at the moment, it's a huge challenge. It's the sort of uncertainty that many people working in the legal field, particularly, face with some of these tools, depending on their proposed use context.
And Coreena, do you think there is also a responsibility on the employers, to be
Yes.
accountable
Yes.
in making sure,
But
that the
I mean,
employees get that training? Because being in an organization, we've always got time constraints. But unless if there is an accountability on the employer, then the employees are actually going to deprioritize the training.
I think it's twofold if you're working in the legal profession, because obviously we have our legal professional ethics and codes of conduct and regulations. So ultimately, as individuals, we are also responsible for our practice behaviours. But I think at a sort of general corporate level, there needs to be training put in place, and also there'll be related insurance requirements. I'm sure it will be, unfortunately, the insurance that will start to really drive these behaviours. There's more litigation over data breaches and privacy issues. There will be calls for more corporate responsibility, and that will propagate down. But I think in advance of that, it's up to corporations to put in place the right um, training systems to give their employees not only confidence in using the tools, but also psychological confidence. That's something I've become particularly aware of just from talking to other people about AI tools, and also to tool developers. The more senior many people are within their profession, the more they have established ways of working. And AI tools are great, but they're also very disruptive, and they can be hugely undermining to effective working if you've got certain routines. Many tools, of course, will eventually increase productivity, but until then, they're being sort of, in some instances, almost forced upon us. We've talked about suddenly WhatsApp has AI. A large provider of office software tools has their AI system everywhere, and I have to get that removed because I have clients that do not want me to use AI in any of the work that I do for them. And there's the stress of doing that because every other day when I turn on the computer, there's an update and it's there again. So there's a huge, I think, psychological battle. We've all been there, trying to juggle keeping up to date with modern technology whilst, balancing our commitments to our clients and our commitments to our employers and other parts of business. And at the same time, developing the skill sets and the confidence to use these tools responsibly where it is appropriate. But it is a real, I mean, my impression, I would say, the Wild West out there at the moment in many respects. Some employers, I think, are wonderful and they're really getting their act together. There are some amazingly responsible tool developers as well. But at the same time, because it's an emerging field, because it's developing so quickly, we're all facing challenges trying to keep up and keep on top of the regulatory requirements we might face, but also just the ethical and privacy concerns that so many of us have.
Yeah. I want to just pick up on the thread of the sort of push-pull and the sorry, just getting a little bit of feedback. I don't know, Coreena, your mic. But there's that balance that has to be achieved that you were just talking about, Coreena. It's, you want people to use AI tools because it's sort of, this is just the way things are happening these days. So you don't want to be left behind, but you also don't want to be left behind. You don't want to be left behind, but you also don't want to have over reliance on the tool. And so I have been playing around with a lot of different tools that's available to us. And I find myself worried that if I use AI too much, am I going to stop being able to critically think for myself? Am I going to stop being able to come up with the right words to write? I sometimes in my personal life use AI to write a nice card or a nice note, and I put in, the prompt has to be perfect. And then it comes back with wonderful stuff that you can work from, but it's never perfect. And so I'm like, but if I keep doing that, what if I'm not going to be able to come up with the words myself? And so I find myself accepting and embracing that AI is here and AI is useful, but then also having to remind myself, hey, don't over rely. And so in the workforce context, there's that push pull as well, where you want folks to embrace AI and to use all the wonderful tools available to you, but you don't want them to be like using it without regard to judgment, right? Like we still need the human. We can't forget about the human, because no matter what, AI is not going to replace the years and years of experience we have in our respective. It's not going to replace all of the background and the history that we have, that we know that AI doesn't know, because it only knows what we give it. And so achieving that balance, I think, is what can be difficult, both for personal, AI user perspective, but also from like an employer's perspective.
That, can I just pick you up, because you said a wonderful phrase this then, the use of AI with judgment. And of course, at our level of experience, we have judgment. We know when the AI is probably wrong. But what really concerns me is the sort of, the emerging workforce, the people who have left university and they're struggling to find entry level positions, and they're almost competing with some of these AI tools. And yet they're also so over reliant on the use of AI. Many of us may have read, the apparently a huge culture in many universities of using AI to ensure you get good grades. But then what are they learning? They're going to be brilliant at using AI, but not necessarily brilliant in their academic discipline. And that to me is a big concern, because you can say, and I can say, we use AI with judgment. Will the next generation have that skill set? And how are we going to facilitate them developing it?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I know I'm at a university, so I think there's a lot of struggles about how much to limit it, how much, what is the appropriate usage, for student work, because especially as, more and more students come up and have experience, using it in their daily lives, like we even said, kind of not even knowing it's in all these apps, it's in all these things. I definitely hear your point about about being kind of too reliant on it. I also use it to write sometimes personal emails or cards, and then I gave a card to someone, and then they were like, "Oh, that was such a nice message," and then I honestly didn't remember what I wrote, because it wasn't as much thought. Because I mean, even though I prompted it and I wrote it down, it's like if it wasn't actually from my brain, it wasn't as much in the memory. And so it did make me catch myself, and okay, let me try to make sure that I am using my judgment, using my brain, not letting it take over. But I think we have kind of segued into our next topic about kind of navigating this evolving AI landscape and addressing some of these concerns for the future. I know, I think, Coreena, you kind of talked about it too. Like, we're hearing about jobs being lost, or things changing in the job market, or roles being changed. So I mean, how much, what are the concerns there, and what are some things that we can talk about to kind of stay relevant, or address those concerns.
Shall I go? Okay. So on that point, where I have when I meet with women, especially women who are at levels where you don't necessarily have a subject matter expert background. So whether it's an executive assistant, project management, more, those who are entering the marketplace, as you said, or those who've been in the marketplace, but they are at the level where they're quite comfortable using Microsoft Office, but anything more than that, it becomes more of because you become anxious using these new tools. So again, if you've been in a tech company for so long, you may be more comfortable in engaging and embracing new technology. But whereas if you are in a service industry, let's say like a law firm, an accounting firm, um, what is important is that as individuals, I think it's very important. And I've got 4 C's, it's almost like a cycle. You start with curiosity. So you've got to be curious about this new tool that's out there, whether it's ChatGPT, Google Bot, Microsoft Copilot, whatever it is. You have to be curious about using them and learning how to use it. I know we've talked about using AI with judgment, but really to use AI, you have to have critical thinking as well. Because to ask the right questions, you can't just ask very basic questions. You're going to get extremely basic answers. And that's where, you end up getting answers with hallucinations, for example. So it's important that as individuals, like you've got to keep peeling the layer when you're doing these prompts in order to get the right answers. But that takes time, effort, and lots of practice. So curiosity is important. And then secondly, in order to use these AI tools, it's a craft, right? So that's the second C. Because once, and I remember, that probably shows my age, but in the UK, and I don't know, Coreena, if you remember this, but probably 15, 20 years ago, when we were transitioning from Word Perfect to Microsoft Office, there were computer programs that were called like computer licenses. People used to go out there and get these certificates saying, yes, I've got a, computer. I can't remember the name of the course, but it was something license, like a driving license. You've got a computer license. And, so much so with AI today, perhaps that's what we need, very robust learning pathways so that as individuals, you're going from one level to the next. And then it's not just about getting the certificates, but you've started from the foundation, a bit like doing, when you, with children, I think it's QMON, you always start off with very basic addition and subtraction, and then you work your way up to more complex maths equations. And that's the same thing with AI as well.
Yeah.
So we've got to embrace learning AI like it's a craft, which means, in your CV, you have to be able to demonstrate that you can use them, you're AI savvy.
Right.
And then third is consistency, right? Because if some people use 4 or 5 in order to cross-check the answers that they are getting, but really in terms of consistency, if you can keep working on your prompts, and there are lots of materials out there on how you can develop your prompts. There are so many acronyms out there as well, on how to get an effective prompt to provide the analysis or the output that we require. So we've got to learn that as well. Even though we are practicing lawyers and patent attorneys, but this is different, right? And so it's not given that we will write perfect prompts. We've got to learn them too. And then we come back to curiosity again. So it's almost like a cycle. It starts with curiosity and then it ends with curiosity as well, because it's an iterative process. And it's interesting reading I was reading, in preparation for today, one of the research by WorkMe, they said only 7% of employees have received in-depth AI training. That's in the UK. So it's a very, very small number. But at the end of the day, just like we own our career path, in terms of learning AI, the accountability is with us. And the other buzzword, apart from judgment and critical thinking, I will add in there is discipline. So unless we've got the self-discipline to really understand, or rather identify the right learning pathway, then you're going to be left out. We're going to be left out. So 10 years from now, the same way AI has rapidly developed from machine learning and then very quickly to Gen AI, and then now we were talking about agentic AI. It's moving so quickly, and we've got to find ways to keep up with it, and that involves discipline on our part to be curious and to learn the craft and to be consistent in using them.
And I think I'd add to that also to perceive the opportunities, because AI, I think, should enhance our function as humans. It has the ability to alter many of our roles fundamentally, but that should free us to actually enhancing what we do in other areas. So as long as we have the basic skill set, and I agree, I think this is the biggest challenge actually, Deepa, is educating people who are being established in the workplace with the basics, because it is, if you're working in certain areas of business administration, AI means, very little to you from a technical perspective, apart from the fact that it's a tool that's there and people seem to be doing all these amazing things with it. But one of the things that has really struck me is so many fail to understand, the limitations of these models that come along with all their abilities. At the end of the day, real reasoning is not there, but the perception of reasoning is very, very strong, and the impression that you're getting a very, well thought out reliable answer. I think that is the issue. Is the tools themselves present such a credible and authoritative example. And I had to give a talk last year to the European Patent Institute, and I wanted to give a very simple example of how it would hallucinate. And I just used ChatGPT, and I asked it, how many apples are in half a dozen? And it came back really authoritatively. Well, there are 12 apples in a dozen, and so half a dozen would be three. And I mean, it was completely wrong. I don't know where it got the answer from, and I think, and then I asked it, well, how many apples in a dozen? And it came out with the wrong answer. And I was like, well, you've just answered that, but this, and of course, the models have moved on now. That hallucination would go, but it doesn't come up with a number 6 or 12. It works it out for you, but there's no actual reasoning following the text that you're seeing on the screen. And so it's not just about understanding how to use the tools, but also understanding how the use of the tools can be quite deceptive. We've all heard of the lawyer who asked, well, I know people who've asked for case law, and the cases are made up, but they are so beautifully detailed in the analysis. You wouldn't know from what you're seeing. These are figments of the AI system's imagination, as it were, except they're not. It's basically looked for probability that this text follows in a sequence, and it's given you what it believes would be the most probable response that fits the prompts that you've generated. So I think you're right. Education is vital, not just to understand how to use the tools, but also to build in that safeguard of understanding their limitations. And that's also why we as humans have to be accountable and responsible, I think, for what they're producing, because unless it's a very limited, well-structured training data set with many of these more general generative models, there's what we actually see. In fact, there's a very high rate of hallucinations, but then they get filtered and screened down to increase that probability. But it is just a sequence of patterns that they've seen in data that would appear to be the most suitable response to our prompt. And a lot of the time it looks incredibly, really, really good until they get it wrong and you go, oh, hold on a minute, it's just so yeah. So I think awareness is as well as responsibility. And that's why we have to value ourselves as humans. We think differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think those are all really, really good points. And I think we've kind of flew through this discussion because now we only have 5 minutes left. So I appreciate all of the insights. I think to go through a little bit of a recap, we really talked about the importance of, kind of responsible, ethical AI and what that means to us, and that does kind of have to come from the top down. That has to be sort of, companies, there's some corporate responsibility there to make sure and make that a priority. We talked a lot about the transparency and the privacy issue and making sure we are handling people's data correctly. I know we talked about the need to really get the education and kind of the right education. I think I think a lot of us, don't fully know where to start. I mean, I think Deepa, what you mentioned about the percentage of companies or people that are actually getting training is very illuminating. And so I think with all of this discussion about AI, it is surprising that we're not really getting that education. So I will shout out to Ashley and thank her for having these kinds of conversations, which do help promote education and help people do a little bit of a deeper dive and understand. So I think just at the end, I will ask everyone to just kind of give their closing remarks or last statements or any useful tip or resource or anything. So again, I guess we'll start with and
Yeah, you really summed it up nicely, Meredith. I wanted to say from an in-house attorney perspective that there's a couple of things that folks who are at companies looking to have an AI program can think about. And we've already talked about it, so I just want to sum it up real quick. We talked about responsible AI principles, including governance and having a governing body. We talked about training, learning pathways, super important. If you want to entice people to do that, you can add a badging or certificate thing at the end and be like, here you go, you finished the program. One thing we didn't talk about that I find to be really useful at Verizon is we have an acceptable use policy for AI. And that's sort of like, do's and don'ts, and gets pretty granular with respect to certain tools and the kind of tools we use and what you can do with data and how you can use it. And so I think an acceptable use policy could be super helpful. And then the last thing I'll say is that with AI, I feel like there's a lot of contradictions. And so that balance is really important, and remembering that it's still just a machine and it does not replace the human. And so, keeping it human and learning how to coexist in a healthy way with AI is the goal, because it's not going away. But then also being mindful from both an individual and also a professional capacity, the kinds of data that we're putting into AI, because we're thinking about AI 10 years from now. I know my data is already out there in many places because I give my data in exchange for the various tools and services. And in return, I get the wonderful whatever tools that use social media, et cetera, et cetera. But just thinking 10 years from now, the amount of data that's going to be out there about me as a user is just mind-blowing and can be a little scary. And so how do we sort of mitigate that and be mindful of that as we are consumers of these wonderful tools? So much to think about.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Coreena, do you have some closing remarks or anything you wanted to add?
I think to anybody else who listens to this who has concerns about their role in AI and who is anxious, it is an unsettling in terms of the pace at which these tools are rolling out, but you're not alone. There's so many resources online to help you, and it's in a way, I think it's a very human and natural reaction, because we are curious and we want to do our jobs well, and we want to do them right. And to do them right with AI is something that I think will take practice, but it's certainly achievable for everybody who puts in the effort and who is accountable for their own career path.
And Deepa, anything else to close us out?
Just to extend, what Coreena was saying, I think as individuals, we have to take accountability for the learning pathway for AI. It's on us. As much as there is accountability on employers, but let's start with me, so that we are ready for what's coming next.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. It definitely inspired me to do more learning about AI and look at more resources, because there is just so much to learn. And hopefully we gave some people some practical tips. So it was great, and appreciate it very much talking to you ladies.